Hi everybody, I'm still trying to get to sleep again. Sorry about this video, I'm using a different phone that has a less quality. But the main thing is the content that's going to be discussed. For those of you trying to go to sleep like myself, it's best to try to go to sleep with learning Torah. Just one Mishnah and we'll all be asleep. You can make a song of that. Just one Mishnah and we'll all be asleep. Just one mitzvah, come and join with me. And Mashiach will come. And our task will be done. I'm just joking. Anyways. I'm doing Pirkei Avos. How do I do this? Actually, I don't have any way of turning this thing around because this camera. Just go like this. There's no way of doing that either. It's Pirkei Avos, Ethics of the Fathers, the Rabbi Gabriel and Rivka Holtzberg edition. I don't have no way of reversing the camera, unfortunately. It doesn't have that feature. Do I? No, I don't have that feature. Or do I? What's this button? No, that was just a picture. Okay, this Motorola 5G does not have a way to reverse the camera unless everything appears backwards. Okay, so I'm doing Mishnah 1. Pirkei Avos, Chapter 1, Mishnah 1. Just because the last Mishnah I just did, I believe it referred to this Mishnah. That's why I want to do it. I want to cover this Mishnah. So it says in Pirkei Avos, Chapter 1, Moshe kibel Torah misinai umesara liyoshua v'yoshua lizikenim uzikenim lineviim uneviim misaruha le'anshe cheneses hagdoila heim amru Shalisha Devorim. Hevu Misunim Badin Vehamidu Talmidim Harbe Vaasu Siyag Latera. Okay, what does that say in English? So Moshe received the Torah from Sinai and pass it on to Yoshua ben Nun. I'm just saying Joshua. Everyone knows that Joshua that Moshe passed it down to was his student, Yoshua. And Yoshua passed it to the elders. And if anybody knows anything about Yoshua, it's my name. That's my Jewish name, Chaim Yoshua. But one thing you can learn from Yoshua is that he served Moshe Rabbeinu. That would mean he would literally do everything he could for Moshe Rabbeinu. He would attend to all his needs. So you learn from Yehoshua that if you assist your rabbi and you clean the synagogue and you bring a drink to him while he's teaching and you do all those little things, then by serving your rabbi and by attending to your rabbi, you can reach to a higher level. So Moshe Rabbeinu was the leader of the generation, and Yehoshua was so dedicated to his rabbi that his rabbi and leader prayed for him amongst the 12 spies. And with the 12 spies, he was one of the two that didn't sin. And not only that, when Moshe couldn't cross to Israel, Yehoshua ben Nun was able to cross. And he had the strength of Moshe Rabbeinu. He was able to fight victoriously against his enemies and lead them to Israel. So through serving Moshe, I mean, obviously he served Hashem, but through honoring Moshe and taking care of his rabbi, he reached the highest of heights. and he became the next leader, the next Navi, the next prophet. And he became great just by the little thing of taking care of your rabbi. And I'm sponsoring this from this, it's dedicated to Chabad of Colorado Springs, the Jewish Community Center. I'm going to start fundraising. I'm going to keep doing videos all the time. If you guys could help my Chabad house, I'd really appreciate it. I'm doing these videos completely free. But if you guys could subscribe and like and share, at the very least, I'd appreciate it. And those that have money, if they could give to the Chabad house and maybe tell the rabbi, or I'm going to hopefully get a link. I can get credit for that because that's my livelihood. I'm going to be fundraising for the Rabbi Boaz Vituk of the Chabad Jewish Community Center of Colorado Springs. And by taking care of your rabbi, you can reach the highest of high levels. So yeah, anyways, going back to the Mishnah, I got off topic. So Moshe got the Torah from Hashem at Har Sinai. He passed it on to Yoshua. Yoshua passed it on to the elders. The elders passed it on to the prophets. And the prophets passed it on to the men of the great assembly. They said 3 things. Be patient in judgment. Raise many disciples. And make a protective fence for the Torah. Now that's a lot to take in. I have literally 1, 2, 3 pages and a couple paragraphs of commentary on that. Mishnah 1, Moshe Kabil. Moshe received. Whereas the other Mishnaic tracts deal with Jewish law and ritual, Avos deals with ethics and morals. The sayings of Avos may therefore be misconstrued to be the personal sentiments of the sages, and compared to other books of ethics that are of human origin. Avos therefore begins. Avos. Moshe received, whereas the Mishnaic tract deals with Jewish law and ritual, Avos deals with ethics and morals. The saying of Avos may therefore be misconstrued to be the personal sentiments of the sages and be compared to other books of ethics that are of human origin. Sorry, I just lost my place. Avos therefore begins with a chronicle of the transmission of Torah to indicate that all of its sayings are rooted in the revelation at Sinai, Bartanura Mary. Another explanation, Avos contains the principles by which the Torah can be perceived and passed on throughout the generations. See Midrash Shmuel. Now we're going to go into the timeline. It shows Moshe Rabbeinu is from the era of BCE 1313 to 1273. Yoshua was from 1273 to 1245. And the elders are from 1245 to 931. And the prophets are from 931 to 313. The Great Assembly is from C391 to 361. And Mishnah is from 188 to CE. 5 stages. 5 stages. The 5 stages of transmission mentioned in the Mishnah allude to 5 stages within development of the Torah student. Sinai, from Sinai. From the one who revealed himself at Sinai, Bartanura. By referring to Moshe and Sinai, the Mishnah alludes to the first step in becoming a Torah student. When God wished to give the Torah, each of the various mountains argued that it was most worthy to host this great event. Mount Sinai, on the other hand, was not particularly tall, and therefore humbly remained silent. God chose Mount Sinai, Midrash Tehillim 68:17. This is interesting. We're coming towards Shavuos. Shavuos commemorates not only the completion of the Sfiras HaOmer, but that's exactly where we receive the Torah and the Ten Commandments. And this is teaching us about Mount Sinai. There's all these mountains that God could have chosen. What's special about Mount Sinai? On one hand, it's not the biggest mountain. That teaches you the quality of humility. But at the same time, with humility, Mount Sinai still remains to be a mountain. And the quality of a mountain is it's still tall, and this represents greatness. So Mount Sinai represents the greatness of humility, which every person should try to obtain that trait. So when God wished to give to the Torah, each of the various mountains argued that it was the most worthy to host this great event. Mount Sinai, on the other hand, was not particularly tall and therefore humbly remained silent. When everyone was boasting about how great it was, Mount Sinai was quiet. God chose Mount Sinai, Har Sinai, Midrash Tehillim 68:17. So true humility isn't boasting about how great you are, isn't flaunting your wisdom, showing how wonderful you are, but remaining silent. When your rabbi is speaking, you're quiet. Unless it's your time to speak, he gives you permission, and you're learning with the rabbi, but you're not speaking to show how smart you are. You're speaking to learn Torah and to teach Torah. And Hashem wants us all to have humility. He also chose Moshe, the humblest man on the face of the earth, a servant of God who recognized that all he possessed was a gift from God. Moshe was very intelligent, very gifted, very amazing. And what did he say? He said, if somebody had my abilities, they would have done so much better than me. That's true humility. To have so much greatness and still not take credit, that's when you have humility. The first step of the Torah student is to become like Sinai and Moshe, humble and selfless. That's the Rebbe in Biurim. Now Yehoshua, Moshe taught Torah to the entire nation at Reuven 54b, epitomizing the dictum of this Mishnah. Raise many students, yet Yehoshua was the one individual of his generation chosen to be the recipient and transmitter of the Torah to the next generation. God chose Yehoshua for this role, not Moshe. So God chose Yehoshua for this role, not Moshe's children, whom Moshe had requested, because of his diligence and devotion. He never parted from the tent of his master. Exodus 33:11. He would rise early and stay late at the study hall, setting up the benches and spreading the mats. Yalkut Shimoni 776. As I stated in the beginning, he attended to Moshe Rabbeinu. And because of his devotion, because of Yoshua's devotion and discipline was the practical manifestation of Moshe's absolute selflessness. The Mishnah thus alludes in the second step in acquiring Torah, the discipline born of an absolute Joshua-like devotion and commitment to Torah. The Rebbe in Biurim, Zikanim, elders. These are not the 70 elders of Moshe's days, but rather the sages, beginning with Otniel ben Kenaz, who outlived Yehoshua and who in turn passed the Torah on to subsequent elders. This transmission went on for almost 3 centuries. See the timeline through the era of the judges, which ended with Eli, until the era of the prophets, which began with Shmuel, That's in Mary Magen Avos. The Talmud interprets the Hebrew word for elder, zaken, to mean one who has acquired. Ze shekana, wisdom. Kedushim 32b. In order for a student to acquire wisdom and make it his own, he must use his own intellect to comprehend the subject. His unique way of thinking must be recognized and addressed. Acquiring Torah is the third step in becoming a Torah student. It constitutes a major shift from the first two steps, which require the suppression of self-humility and discipline. Once the student has internalized these attributes, he must now allow his self to emerge and acquire Torah with his mind, understanding the wisdom of Torah and making it his own. The Rebbe and Biurim. Nevi'im, the prophets. The primary role of a prophet is to inspire the nation and to relay his generation the message of God for that time in matters not addressed by the Torah, such as whether or not to wage war on a particular nation. The prophet's prophetic vision has no bearing on the interpretation of Torah law, which must be determined intellectually, using the halachic categories set down in the Torah. He has no more authority than a Torah sage who lacks prophetic vision. Rambam's intro to Mishnah. So it was not for their prophetic vision that the prophets were made transmitters of Torah. Rather, they were chosen because of their great wisdom, the type of wisdom that enabled them to receive prophetic vision in the first place. Because they were great in learning Torah, and they had such wisdom that caused them to receive prophecy in the first place. And that's what Rambam states in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah 7:1. Nevertheless, they are referred to here as prophets because the Torah student must, on some level, duplicate the prophetic method of study, in which the sage sees the spiritual antecedents of a given law, and then after understanding the concept on the physical plane with his rational mind, hands down a halachic ruling, see Biurei HaZohar, Genesis 22. With prophets, the Mishnah alludes to the fourth step in acquiring Torah. The Torah student must be in a proper spiritual state, with the proper awe for Torah, a reflection of the prophet's spiritual awareness, in order to reach the truth of a halachic matter. That's what the Rebbe states in Biurim. Now, the Great Assembly. This was a council of 120 prophets and sages headed by Ezra the scribe at a great assembly in Jerusalem following his Aliyah from Babylon. Nehemiah 8:10. Among original numbers were Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Zerubbabel, Mordecai, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. See Megillah 17b. These sages faced the challenge of rebuilding and fortifying Judaism after the upheaval and assimilation caused by the Babylonian exile. Oh, that's horrible. There was assimilation where Jews were marrying non-Jews because of the Babylonian exile. They fixed these guys fixed the biblical canon, introduced daily prayer and its liturgy, Kiddush, Havdalah, and many other practices that have shaped Jewish practice to this day. Restoring the crown. While they were called the Great Assembly because they returned the crown to the original glory, as in that day of Moses, who referred to God as great, strong, and awesome. When Jeremiah saw the destruction of Jerusalem, he cried out, "Foreigners are reveling in his place. Where is his awesomeness?" And he no longer called God awesome. Daniel came along and said, Foreigners are enslaving his children. Where is his strength? And he no longer called God strong. But the great assembly came along and said, to the contrary, this persecution itself is an expression of his strength and his awesomeness. For if not for his awesomeness, how could a solitary nation endure among the nations who seek its destruction? They returned the crown to its former glory and said, the great, strong, and awesome God. Yoma 69b, cited by Bartanura. It's one of the things I really like about the Gemara. Some rabbis will hold this way and that way, but other rabbis will learn the same thing and come up with the complete opposite conclusion. And when it comes to the Gemara and the Torah, there are 70 faces of the Torah, so in some sense they're both right. But some just seem like a better answer than the other. Like maybe on a surface level, an opinion will be like this. But on a better, more deeper level, the sages said, no. The very fact that they were in exile and they were suffering so much but still endured, that shows how amazing and strong Hashem is. It's mind-blowing. So, in the application, the first 4 stages of Torah study can be divided into the preparation and foundations for study, symbolized by Moshe and Yoshua, humility and devotion. So Moshe taught humility and Yoshua ben Nun taught devotion. Study itself symbolized by elders and prophets, full comprehension and spiritual awareness. In these 4 steps, there are only 2 entities, the Torah and its students. In the 5th step, alluded to by the Great Assembly, a 3rd entity is introduced, the world, a world that conceals God's awesomeness and greatness. The Torah student duplicates the path of the Great Assembly by learning to apply the wisdom of Torah even to a place of divine concealment, and furthermore, to find divinity in the concealment. And it is through this challenge that the student truly understands Torah, when Torah has to be applied practically, when it is no longer theoretical. The student makes sure to get it right and reaches the truth and essence of the Torah's meaning. This is the Rebbe in Biurim. So the 5 stages: Moshe's humility, Yehoshua ben Nun's discipline and devotion, the elders teach internalization, the prophets teach spiritual awareness, and the Great Assembly teach practical application. Haim Amru Shloisha Devorin. They said 3 things. Actually, they said many things. The uniqueness of these 3 dictums is that they constitute the formula for perpetuating the Torah. Bartanura. So we got a page and a couple paragraphs. Hevu Misunim Badin. So that means be patient in judgment. This statement can be seen as an instruction to various people. In Judges, do not rush to hand down a ruling based on your first assumption. Think it over and you may come to a different conclusion. Rambam. You can see this, what just happened earlier. Daniel was saying, what did he say earlier? He wasn't a judge of the Great Assembly. But, what did he say? He said something about how, one second. Something about how Hashem was lacking because I don't know, I just said it earlier. I'm just tired right now. Baruch Hashem. Something about how Hashem was lacking because look at all the suffering that the Jewish people were going through. But then later they said the complete opposite. Yeah. So Yirmiyahu saw the destruction of Jerusalem, and he cried out, "Foreigners are reveling in his palace. Where is his awesomeness?" And he no longer called God awesome. And Daniel came along and said, "Foreigners are enslaving his children. Where is his strength?" And he no longer called God strong. So later the sages, the rulers said completely the opposite. When you're a true leader and a judge, not just a prophet, you don't rush to conclusions. You patiently consider the conditions of divine concealment that led them to their sorry state. And then they praise Hashem. That's when you truly become a leader. You see the difficulty, you see the struggle, you really think about the situation, and you have a completely different result. Because you don't just rush to the decision. You, as a judge, you have to look at the whole thing to get the complete MS of everything. So you will then be impressed